How will Game of Thrones end? Are Jon and Dany going to kill all the White Walkers, or will they make peace instead? Most fans of Game of Thrones have a similar reaction to the main plot. Our internal monologue is something along these lines, akin to a sports fan shouting at the TV. Ah! Zombies! And crazy ice demons who seem to be controlling the zombies. Holy fucking shit! Oh good, one guy got away and he can warn everyone. Wait, Ned, you aren't listening to him. No, listen to that guy. He was telling the truth. Shit, I am really worried that these White Walkers are gonna come fuck shit up and this guy Ned isn't gonna be ready for it, and they cut his head off. Holy shit, those dragon eggs actually hatched? Wow, thank the gods. Dragons are exactly what we needed to fight those ice zombies. Oh fuck, a war? Guys, this is seriously like the worst time ever for a war. I know you don't like each other, and you don't know there are demons and zombies coming to kill you, but it's happening. No, don't use scorched earth tactics to destroy the harvest. Winter is coming. Everyone will starve in addition to the zombies. Man, oh man, I hope these dragons are big enough by the time winter comes, and I hope someone tells Daenerys to get her ass over to the wall to team up with Jon and fight the zombies. Oh good, Bran might be Keanu Reeves after all, and the children of the forest are going to help save the day, just like they did in The Long Night. Phew, you know, with the children of the forest helping and Dany's dragons and Jon having the right parents to be the heir to the Iron Throne, I'm feeling kind of optimistic about this story, although I'm sure plenty more people will die. That's certainly how I reacted. But then the entire story got flipped on its head in Season 6, Episode 5. When Bran looked back in time and learned that it was actually the children of the forest who created the White Walkers. And this should immediately make us ask the question, are the White Walkers really evil? The obvious answer is no. They have not done anything more evil than characters like Tywin, or Cersei, or even Bran with his evil telepathic enslavement of Hodor. So while the White Walkers have killed thousands of people, we have no evidence that their intention is to wipe out all life in Westeros. But that is what everybody in the story assumes. The other giant clue that the White Walkers are not pure evil is what they are called in the books. In the books, they are only occasionally referred to as the White Walkers. People normally refer to them as the Others. Fear is for the long night, when the sun hides its face for years at a time, and little children are born and live and die, all in darkness, while the direwolves grow gaunt and hungry, and the White Walkers move through the woods. You mean the Others, Bran said querulously. The Others, Old Nan agreed. And here is a quote from a different story by George R.R. Martin on the same subject. Why must we draw these lines, these fine distinctions, these labels and barriers that set us apart? Ace and Nat and Joker, capitalist and communist, Catholic and Protestant, Arab and Jew, Indian and Latino, and on everywhere. And of course, true humanity is to be found only on our side of the line, and we feel free to oppress and rape and kill the other, whoever he might be. In case you aren't familiar with it, the author is obviously utilizing the philosophical concept of the other. Here is an excerpt on the subject from the International Encyclopedia of Human Geography. Otherness is due less to the difference of the other than to the point of view and the discourse of the person who perceives the other as such. Opposing us, the self, and them, the other, is to choose a criterion that allows humanity to be divided into two groups. One that embodies the norm and whose identity is valued, and another that is defined by its faults, devalued, and susceptible to discrimination. Only dominant groups, such as Westerners in the time of colonization, are in a position to impose their categories in the matter. By stigmatizing them as other, barbarians, savages, or people of color, they relegate the peoples that they could dominate or exterminate to the margin of humanity. The otherness of these people has notably been based on their supposed spatial marginality. In addition, certain types of spatial organization, like segregation or territorial constructions, allow the opposition between the self and the other to be maintained or accentuated. Basically, People tend to dehumanize minorities and foreigners for a handful of bad reasons. They speak a different language, they have different colored skin, they worship the wrong god, they live on the other side of the border, and they have a different culture. So we hate them. Of course, the White Walkers meet most of these criteria. They speak a different language, they are a different color, and they live on the other side of a giant wall. Forgetting everything else about them, the mere fact that a giant wall exists naturally makes the people of the Seven Kingdoms be afraid of whoever is on the other side of the wall. But at the beginning of the story, as far as they know, the White Walkers are just a scary bedtime story, while the wildlings definitely exist and like to raid people in the north all the time, stealing weapons and women. So the Night's Watch incorrectly considers it their duty to defend the realm against the wildlings. Now, because we saw the opening scene of episode 1 with the White Walkers killing people, it is immediately obvious to us that the wall was not built to defend the realm from wildlings. The clear implication is that the wall was actually built to keep out the White Walkers. And after the zombie attack in Season 1, Jon Snow and Lord Commander Mormont come to the same conclusion. But then the story got turned on its head in Season 6, and we really need to accept the fact that we have been tricked on a fundamental level about the nature of the White Walkers. Many characters in the story hate the wildlings because they live on the other side of the wall and have a different culture. We know this is wrong because the wildlings are just another group of human beings, and they deserve compassion and understanding from us, not bigotry. But because we have been tricked so effectively by the story, most people fail to apply those same standards to the White Walkers. The White Walkers may live on the other side of the wall and have a different culture, but they are still human beings and deserve compassion and understanding from us, not bigotry. And honestly, if you know anything about the author of the books, George R.R. Martin, it is super obvious that the White Walkers are not pure evil. George is a hippie who writes stories about how war and religious extremism are bad. It would not make any sense for him to write a story where Melisandre, a religious fanatic who burns innocent people alive, is correct about the prophecy of Azor Ahai, and correct that it is justified to wage an all-out genocidal war against the evil others. So we have established that the White Walkers and the Night King are not pure evil. They have their own motives for going to war, just like all the other characters, and we simply don't know what their motives are yet. And this also means it is possible to make peace with them. The question is, will the main characters attempt to make peace? Well, I think that Jon will attempt to negotiate a peace deal with the Night King. When Jon decided to let the wildlings through the wall, many people were horrified by his decision and thought he was crazy. In the books, one such person was Sir Patrick of King's Mountain, who made fun of Jon because Jon is not a racist asshole like Sir Patrick. Sir Patrick smiled. "Tell me, Lord Commander, should the others turn up, do you plan to offer hospitality to them as well?" Obviously, Sir Patrick meant this as a joke. The others are evil demons of legend who lead hosts of the slain into battle and kidnap young maidens and feast their dead servants on the flesh of human children. It would be absolutely ridiculous to offer hospitality to such evil demons. But is it really ridiculous? No, of course not. The White Walkers are humans, just like us. Sir Patrick is a fucking asshole. Again, it is obvious that the character Sir Patrick was joking, but it should be equally obvious that the author was purposely giving us a giant clue about the nature of the White Walkers and how the final conflict will end. George wants us to consider the idea that war is bad and the characters should attempt to make peace with the White Walkers. And there is a good chance that Jon will offer the others hospitality. This idea fits perfectly into Jon's character arc. Jon's character arc is basically to evolve from being pro-war to pro-peace. In the beginning of the story, Jon looks up to King Daeron I as one of his heroes. Daeron Targaryen was only 14 when he conquered Dorne, Jon said. The young dragon was one of his heroes. A conquest that lasted a summer, his uncle pointed out. Your boy king lost 10,000 men taking the place and another 50 trying to hold it. Someone should have told him that war isn't a game. He took another sip of wine. Also, he said, wiping his mouth, Daeron Targaryen was only 18 when he died. Or have you forgotten that part? Right off the bat, Jon starts becoming disillusioned with his childhood hero as Benjen speaks about the true costs of war. Daeron Targaryen was a badass, exactly the type of guy young men tend to worship as heroes. But Daeron was also young, arrogant, and reckless and got tens of thousands of people killed. So wiser men like Benjen look down on Daeron and belittle him as the boy king because he lacked wisdom. Once he is in the Night's Watch, Jon's duty is ostensibly to protect the realm from the wildlings, but that is quickly overshadowed when they are attacked by zombies. After the zombie attack, Jon and Lord Commander Mormont predictably conclude that the real enemy is the White Walkers and not the wildlings, something that we already knew because the story opened with the White Walkers killing 2 men of the Night's Watch. But Jon and Lord Commander Mormont are still wrong. The real enemy is not the wildlings, but it isn't the White Walkers either. The real enemy is war itself. You could even argue that the wall should be torn down to promote peace. Now, even though Jon has concluded that the wildlings are not their real enemy, he still needs to go through a bunch of experiences to really drive home the point that the wildlings are human beings too. When they arrive at the Fist of the First Men, Jon meets Qhorin Halfhand, and Qhorin gives us some vital information on the wildlings. Was he a good ranger? He was the best of us, said the Halfhand, and the worst as well. Only fools like Thorin Smallwood despise the wildlings. They are as brave as we are, Jon. As strong, as quick, as clever, but they have no discipline. They name themselves the Free Folk, and each one thinks himself as good as a king and wiser than a maester. Mance was the same. He never learned how to obey. No more than me, said Jon quietly. According to Qhorin, only fools despise the wildlings. Then they go on their scouting mission, and Jon captures Ygritte. And Ygritte tells Jon the story of Bael the Bard. Were they your kin? He asked her quietly. The 2 we killed? No more than you are. Me? He frowned. What do you mean? You said you were the bastard of Winterfell. I am. Who was your mother? Some woman. Most of them are. Someone had said that to him once. He did not remember who. She smiled again, a flash of white teeth. And she never sung you the song of the winter rose? Long story short, Bael the Bard was a wildling who kidnapped the daughter of Lord Stark and got her pregnant. She gave birth to a son. It turns out they were hiding in the crypts of Winterfell the whole time and never even left, and that son grew up to be the next Lord Stark. Therefore, according to Ygritte, Jon has wildling blood in him. And here is the end of the story. The song ends when they find the babe, but there is a darker end to the story. 30 years later, when Bael was king beyond the wall and led the free folk south, it was young Lord Stark who met him at the frozen ford and killed him, for Bael would not harm his own son when they met sword to sword. So the son slew the father instead, said Jon. Aye, she said, but the gods hate kinslayers, even when they kill unknowing. When Lord Stark returned from the battle and his mother saw Bael's head upon his spear, she threw herself from a tower in her grief. Her son did not long outlive her. One of his lords peeled the skin off him and wore him for a cloak. Ygritte claims that the gods hate kinslayers. This is perhaps the most important concept in Game of Thrones, because it forces us to confront the question, what qualifies as kinslaying? Certainly killing a close relative like a brother, father, son, uncle, that sort of thing would count. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that first cousins also count. But then how far do we go? How distantly related can you be to someone and still have it count as kinslaying? Second cousin? Third cousin? Fifth cousin? 100th cousin? Seriously, how far do we go? I know this sounds ridiculous, but this is actually a point that has been explicitly addressed by more than one character. According to Ygritte, she and Jon are distant kin, because they both have wildling blood. But Ygritte stops short of labeling Jon a kinslayer for killing a wildling 5 minutes ago. So in Ygritte's mind, Jon is too distantly related to those wildlings for it to count as kinslaying, even though Jon does have wildling blood. And then we have the famous last words of Rickard Karstark. The blood of the first men flows in my veins as much as yours, boy. You would do well to remember that. I was named for your grandfather. I raised my banners against King Aerys for your father, and against King Joffrey for you. At Ox Cross and the Whispering Wood and in the Battle of the Camps, I rode beside you, and I stood with Lord Eddard on the Trident. We are kin, Stark and Karstark. This kinship did not stop you from betraying me, Robb said, and it will not save you now. Kneel, my lord. Lord Rickard had spoken truly, Catelyn knew. The Karstarks traced their descent to Carlin Stark, a younger son of Winterfell who had put down a rebel lord 1,000 years ago and been granted lands for his valor. The castle he built had been named Karlshold, but that soon became Karhold, and over the centuries the Karhold Starks had become Karstarks. Old gods or new, it makes no matter, Lord Rickard told her son. No man is so accursed as the kinslayer. Rickard Karstark claims that Robb Stark is a kinslayer, but let's really examine that logic. Cat tells us that House Karstark branched off of House Stark 1,000 years ago. Assuming an average generation of 25 years, like in the real world, that would make Rickard Karstark roughly the 40th cousin of Robb Stark. And that seems like it maybe shouldn't count as kinslaying. But Rickard Karstark himself didn't even bring up his ancestor Carlin Stark from 1,000 years ago. No, Rickard went all the way back. 10,000 fucking years. He said, "The blood of the first men flows in my veins as much as yours, boy. You would do well to remember that." The implication from that statement is that it is totally fine to kill people of Andal descent, like members of House Lannister, but it is kinslaying for Robb Stark to kill anyone with the blood of the first men in their veins. Oh, come on! That's absurd. And that's the whole point of the kinslaying issue. If you go back far enough in time, you are literally related to every human on the planet. Now, the characters in Game of Thrones don't know about Darwin's theory of evolution, and they don't know that they are literally related to every human on the planet, but we do. So if the true definition of kinslaying is the one given by Rickard Karstark, that you cannot kill anyone related to you by blood, no matter how distantly you are related, then we must concede that killing anyone at all counts as kinslaying, because every human on the planet is related by blood. And that includes the White Walkers, who are also human. Not to mention the Night King is probably a Stark himself. And this idea fits perfectly with the political attitudes of the author. Remember, George is a hippie. He was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War. So is it reasonable to conclude that the author himself considers the act of killing anyone to be kinslaying? Yes, I think that is a pretty safe bet. The only way to avoid kinslaying is to avoid war altogether, which is exactly what the author wants and how the story will end. Finally, let's jump ahead to the greatest moment in Jon's character arc when he makes his case for saving the wildlings. Marsh flushed a deeper shade of red. "The Lord Commander must pardon my bluntness, but I have no softer way to say this. What you propose is nothing less than treason. For 8,000 years, the men of the Night's Watch have stood upon the wall and fought these wildlings. Now you mean to let them pass, to shelter them in our castles, to feed them and clothe them and teach them how to fight. Lord Snow, must I remind you? You swore an oath." "I know what I swore," Jon said the words. "I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men." Were those the same words you said when you took your vows? They were, as the Lord Commander knows. Are you certain that I have not forgotten some? The ones about the king and his laws, and how we must defend every foot of his land and cling to each ruined castle? How does that part go? Jon waited for an answer. None came. "I am the shield that guards the realms of men." Those are the words. So tell me, my lord, what are these wildlings if not men? Jon makes a great argument, but let's continue his logic and apply it to the White Walkers. What are the White Walkers if not men? Of course, they are human, so Jon should be defending them as well. And on top of that, I theorized in my previous video that the Night King and his 12 companions, seen here dressed in all black, are actually the original 13 members of the Night's Watch. So not only are the White Walkers men, and therefore deserving of Jon's protection according to his oath, but they may have sworn the same oath to the same gods. Jon is literally about to fight a battle against the original Night's Watch in his effort to fulfill the mission of the Night's Watch. Irony. Classic George. At this point, Jon is most of the way through his pro-peace character arc. He just needs to take that last step. He needs to realize that the White Walkers are humans too, and he needs to make peace with the Night King. Now, could some other character negotiate a peace deal? Specifically, I'm thinking Daenerys, the lady with the weapons of mass destruction under her control. Sure, Daenerys might make peace, but her character arc simply isn't geared toward that ending. Not to say she is pro-war, Daenerys seems more concerned with slavery. Her character arc may end with her pushing for the end of feudal society, realizing that life as a peasant in Westeros is only one step up from slavery. Remember, the author is a hippie. There needs to be some socialism thrown in at the end of the story for good measure. Anyways, that's why Jon and the Night King will make peace. War is bad. All killing counts as kinslaying, even killing the White Walkers. In my next video, I will reveal the true story of Tyrion and Varys. Spoiler, Varys is an asshole.